I'm Sarah, 31, and after 6 years of marriage to David, I still felt like I was auditioning for a role I'd never quite land in his family. Last Thanksgiving at the Martinez family estate in Westchester, I thought maybe this year would be different. David's older brother, Marcus, had other plans. While everyone gathered around the mahogany dining table laden with Patricia's signature china, I tried sharing exciting news about my photography exhibition, opening next month in Soho. Marcus interrupted with that familiar smirk that had haunted family gatherings for years. You know what, Sarah? If you just vanished tomorrow, nobody would even miss you. We'd probably have more fun without all your artistic commentary. The table erupted in uncomfortable laughter. Even David chuckled, avoiding my eyes as he reached for his wine glass. I sat there for a moment, feeling that familiar burn of humiliation. Then something inside me shifted. I slowly raised my champagne flute, locked eyes with Marcus, and said with perfect clarity, "You know what, Marcus? Challenge accepted. I left that night. If you're enjoying this story, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. Hit subscribe to find out what happened when I showed up to their world again, but this time, on my own terms." David and I met during my senior year at NYU. I was finishing my fine arts degree in photography while working nights at a trendy gallery in Chelsea to cover my student loans. He was completing his MBA at Columbia, his tuition fully covered by the Martinez Family Trust Fund. We connected at an art opening where he was networking for his family's real estate development firm, and I was working the event as a photographer. He started asking thoughtful questions about my work, and for the first time in months, someone seemed genuinely interested in my artistic vision rather than just the price points. Our romance felt like a movie montage. Within 2 months, we were spending every weekend together. By graduation, he proposed with a Tiffany ring that cost more than my entire college debt. I was swept away by his charm, his apparent appreciation for my creativity, and what seemed like genuine love for who I was. When we married 18 months later, I thought I was gaining not just a husband, but an entire support system. The Martinez family represented everything my background lacked: generational wealth, social connections, and the kind of stability I'd never known growing up. The Martinez family had built their empire over 3 generations. Eduardo, David's father, had expanded the family's construction business into luxury real estate development across the Northeast. Carmen, his mother, managed their social calendar with the precision of a military operation while serving on the boards of the Met, Lincoln Center, and 2 prestigious private schools. Marcus, the eldest son at 35, was being groomed to take over the business empire. He'd graduated Harvard Business School and already owned a portfolio of properties in Manhattan. Sophia, the youngest at 26, had followed a more traditional path, marrying her college boyfriend right after graduating from Vassar and immediately starting a family in Greenwich. My own story couldn't have been more different. Raised by a single mother who worked as a nurse while putting herself through school, I understood the value of every dollar and the dignity of earning your way. My younger sister Emma and I shared a small apartment in Queens until I left for college on a partial scholarship I'd fought tooth and nail to get. When I first visited the Martinez compound in Westchester, a sprawling Mediterranean-style mansion with manicured gardens and a 3-car garage, I felt like I'd stepped into a completely different universe. The class differences weren't announced with fanfare. They lived in the spaces between words, in the pause before someone answered my questions, in the way conversations shifted when I entered the room. Carmen would compliment my little photography hobby, as if I were a child showing off crayon drawings. Despite my work being featured in several respected galleries, Eduardo would patiently explain basic business concepts to me over dinner, seemingly unaware that I'd been managing my own freelance photography business since college. Marcus perfected the art of the backhanded compliment. When I landed a contract shooting for a major fashion magazine, he wondered aloud if they'd chosen me, because David's family had connections in that world. When David and I bought our first apartment, a modest one-bedroom in Brooklyn, Marcus questioned whether the neighborhood was really suitable for a Martinez family member. "They don't mean anything by it," David would say whenever I brought up these microaggressions. "Marcus is just protective of the family name. That's how he shows he cares. But Marcus's version of caring felt more like slow poison, administered in small doses at every family gathering. Despite the constant undercurrent of judgment, I threw myself into trying to fit their mold. I volunteered for Carmen's charity galas, networking events where I smiled politely while wealthy donors discussed tax shelters over champagne. I referred potential clients to Eduardo's development firm, even when their aesthetic didn't align with my artistic vision. I memorized the names of their country club friends, learned the difference between their various vacation homes, and nodded knowingly when conversations turned to prep schools and trust fund management. I even started dressing differently for family events, trading my vintage finds and artist wardrobe for the kind of conservative elegance Carmen seemed to prefer. For the first few years of our marriage, I maintained my photography career with determination. I built a solid client base shooting everything from intimate weddings to corporate events, slowly gaining recognition in New York's competitive creative scene. My work was getting noticed, a piece in Time Out New York, features in several photography blogs, invitations to group shows in respectable galleries. Then David received an opportunity to lead a major development project that would require extensive travel between New York and Miami. Without any real discussion, it was simply assumed I would scale back my career to manage our household and be available for family obligations. My photography work dwindled to just a few loyal clients as I found myself increasingly isolated from the creative community I'd worked years to join. My world gradually narrowed to David's sporadic presence and his family's judgmental orbit. Last spring, I miscarried at 10 weeks. The physical pain was devastating, but the emotional aftermath nearly broke me. David was in Miami finalizing permits for a luxury condo development. He offered to fly back, but seemed almost relieved when I insisted I could handle it alone. Carmen sent an elaborate flower arrangement with a note that read, "Perhaps it's a blessing in disguise until you're more established in the family." Marcus suggested that the stress of trying to maintain your little photography business might have been a contributing factor. Only Emma flew in from California, where she was finishing her residency. Bringing homemade soup and sitting with me through those tear-soaked nights when grief felt like it might swallow me whole. The contrast between her genuine care and my in-laws' clinical response cracked something fundamental inside me. Another disappointment to swallow in service of maintaining family harmony. Another piece of myself to sacrifice for the privilege of being a Martinez. By the time Thanksgiving rolled around, I was running on empty. My photography had become mechanical. My friendships had withered from neglect, and my marriage felt increasingly like a performance I was failing at. Still, I held on to a fragile hope that things could improve, that maybe this holiday would be different. That somehow, I could finally earn genuine acceptance from the family I'd married into 6 years ago. The Martinez Thanksgiving was a production worthy of Architectural Digest. Carmen spent weeks planning the menu with their private chef. Eduardo showcased his wine collection to impressed business associates, and dozens of family friends and social connections mingled throughout their perfectly appointed home. It was the event where family hierarchy was displayed and reinforced, where loyalties were tested and outsiders were identified. And despite 6 years of marriage to David, I remained firmly in the outsider category. The morning of Thanksgiving, I spent 4 hours in my makeshift darkroom, printing a series of family portraits. I'd been working on candid shots from various Martinez gatherings over the years. I thought maybe presenting them as a thoughtful gift would finally demonstrate my commitment to the family, my understanding of what mattered to them. David was busy on conference calls with the Miami team, finalizing details for a presentation the following week. When it was time to leave for his parents' house, he hurried me out the door, concerned about arriving precisely on time, not early enough to seem eager, not late enough to appear disrespectful. "Remember, Uncle Roberto is bringing his new girlfriend," he reminded me as we drove through the tree-lined streets of Westchester. "Mom's a little stressed about the seating arrangements, so try to be extra helpful today." I nodded, clutching my portfolio of family photographs. My dress chosen specifically to match Carmen's preferred. Elegant but not flashy. Dress code, already feeling too tight across my shoulders. The Martinez estate was buzzing with activity when we arrived. Catering staff moved efficiently between clusters of guests, serving appetizers from silver trays. Eduardo held court on the terrace, surrounded by admiring friends as he described his latest acquisition, a historic building in downtown Manhattan he planned to convert into luxury condos. Carmen floated from group to group, her laugh musical and perfectly timed, ensuring every guest felt appropriately welcomed and strategically positioned for optimal networking. "There you are," Sophia called out, spotting us as we entered through the main foyer. She air-kissed David, then turned to me with a quick assessment. "Sarah, love the dress. Very suburban chic. The photographer's eye for style, I suppose." She whisked David away before I could respond, linking her arm through his and launching into a story about running into his college roommate at some exclusive event in the city. I stood alone in the marble entryway, portfolio in hand, scanning the crowd for a friendly face, or at least someone I'd met before who might remember my name. End of part 1. I made my way through the crowd toward the kitchen, where Carmen was orchestrating the catering staff with military precision. The space buzzed with controlled chaos, servers arranging appetizers, the chef putting finishing touches on side dishes, and Carmen's assistant checking off items on a detailed timeline. "Oh, Sarah, darling," Carmen said, noticing me hovering in the doorway with my portfolio. "You didn't need to bring anything. We have everything perfectly planned." She gestured vaguely toward a side counter already cluttered with hostess gifts from other guests. "But how thoughtful. Perhaps set it there for now." I placed my carefully curated family photographs on the counter, watching as Carmen immediately directed a server to move Sophia's artisanal cranberry sauce to the center of the display table. My work disappeared behind a tower of wine bottles and gourmet gift baskets. As I stepped back into the main living area, I overheard Carmen instructing her assistant, "Make sure Sophia's contribution gets prominent placement. She drove all the way from Greenwich this morning to deliver it fresh." The next 2 hours passed in a familiar blur of polite smiles and half-finished conversations. I'd start chatting with one of David's cousins about their recent trip to Europe, only to have Carmen sweep them away to meet someone important from the planning commission. I offered to help coordinate the seating arrangements, but was told the staff had everything under control. I tried joining a discussion about the new Whitney exhibition, but couldn't get more than 2 words in before the conversation moved on to private gallery openings I hadn't been invited to. The contrast with how Sophia was treated became impossible to ignore. Despite being married into the family for only 3 years, Carmen proudly introduced her to everyone as Sophia, the one with the perfect eye for interior design. Marcus included her in fond reminiscences about family vacations she couldn't possibly have attended. Even Eduardo, who rarely engaged with extended family, asked detailed questions about her decorating projects. Meanwhile, I felt increasingly invisible, watching from the margins as the Martinez family performed their intricate social choreography around me. When dinner was announced, David finally reappeared at my side, having spent the afternoon deep in conversation with his father's business partners about zoning laws and construction permits. "Having a good time?" he asked, not waiting for an answer before guiding me toward the formal dining room, where Carmen had spent hours perfecting the seating chart. I ended up positioned between Eduardo's elderly brother, Uncle Roberto, who was more interested in his new girlfriend than conversation, and an empty chair that would eventually be filled by Marcus, who was still holding court in the living room. David sat across from me, already engrossed in a heated discussion with Eduardo about Miami property values. The massive table, set with Carmen's grandmother's china and crystal stemware, suddenly felt like an ocean between us. Marcus finally arrived, setting his bourbon glass down with theatrical flair, and immediately commanding attention with an elaborate story about celebrities he'd spotted at some exclusive restaurant in the Hamptons. Sophia asked all the right questions. Carmen beamed with maternal pride. Even Uncle Roberto's girlfriend leaned in to hear better. During a brief pause in Marcus's performance, I saw my opening. "I actually have some exciting news to share," I offered, my voice carrying just enough volume to be heard. My photography series, Hidden New York, got accepted into a group exhibition at the Morrison Gallery in Soho. The opening is next month, and Art Forum is planning to review it. Marcus's eyes narrowed slightly that familiar calculation I'd learned to recognize over the years. "How nice," he said, his tone suggesting it was anything but. "Is that the gallery space above that trendy coffee shop? I walked past it last week. Seemed pretty niche. It's actually one of the most respected emerging artist venues in." I began. "You know what, Sarah?" Marcus interrupted, setting down his fork with exaggerated precision. "If you just vanished tomorrow, nobody would even miss you. We'd probably have more fun without all your artistic commentary." The words hit the table like a physical slap. Silence spread outward from Marcus's seat, reaching every corner of the dining room. Then, as if on cue, the nervous laughter began. Carmen tittered behind her napkin. Eduardo cleared his throat and reached for his wine. Sophia giggled and whispered something to her husband. Even Uncle Roberto, who probably hadn't heard the comment clearly, joined in automatically. David, my husband, my partner, the person who'd promised to love and protect me, chuckled softly while avoiding my eyes entirely. The sound surrounded me like ice water, shocking my system into perfect clarity. I felt simultaneously hyper, visible and completely invisible, my face burning while my hands turned cold. In that crystalline moment, 6 years of accumulated slights, dismissals, and microaggressions condensed into absolute understanding. I saw myself as they saw me, an inconvenient accessory to David's life, tolerated but never truly accepted, always expendable. I didn't cry. I didn't storm out. I didn't create the kind of scene that would later be recounted as evidence of my emotional instability or inability to handle family dynamics. Instead, I slowly raised my champagne flute, met Marcus's smug gaze directly, and said with perfect clarity, "You know what, Marcus? Challenge accepted." A confused silence fell over the table. Marcus's smirk faltered slightly. David looked between us, sensing something fundamental had shifted but unable to identify exactly what. Then Carmen, with her perfect hostess instincts, chirped brightly, "Who's ready for dessert? The chef has prepared the most divine tiramisu." And just like that, the moment passed. For everyone else, for the remainder of the evening, I became an anthropologist studying an alien culture. I watched how effortlessly they all moved through their world of assumed privilege and belonging. I noted how David seamlessly blended with his family's rhythm, while occasionally throwing me an absent smile. I cataloged every slight, every exclusion, every moment I was spoken over or around. Most importantly, I listened to a voice inside me that had been whispering for years, but was now finally loud enough to hear clearly. "You deserve so much better than this." I studied Marcus as he regaled the table with another story, noting how his cruelty was always wrapped in humor, making anyone who objected seem humorless or oversensitive. I watched Carmen orchestrate conversations like a conductor, ensuring the spotlight never lingered too long on anyone who might disrupt her carefully curated family narrative. I observed Sophia's performance of belonging, recognizing now that even she was constantly auditioning, just more successfully than I'd ever managed. Most painful of all, I watched David, the man I'd fallen in love with, the person I'd built my adult life around, participate in my diminishment through his silence, his laughter, his complete failure to see me drowning right in front of him. By the time we gathered our coats to leave, my decision was crystallized. The only question remaining was how to implement it. The drive back to Brooklyn stretched in tense silence. David scrolled through emails on his phone, occasionally reading aloud updates about the Miami project that would take him away for most of December. I stared out the window at the familiar route, past the country clubs and manicured lawns of Westchester, through the urban transition of the Bronx, finally crossing into Brooklyn where we'd built what I'd thought was our life together. When we pulled into our building's parking spot, David finally seemed to notice my unusual quiet. "Everything okay? You've been weird since dinner." I considered my words carefully. Marcus's joke about me vanishing. "Did you think that was funny?" David sighed, unbuckling his seatbelt with obvious irritation. "Come on, Sarah. Don't start this again. Marcus was just being Marcus. You know how he gets at family things." "You laughed," I said simply. "It was a joke, Sarah. Not everything needs to be psychoanalyzed to death." He got out of the car, effectively ending the conversation. That night, as David slept soundly beside me, I lay staring at the ceiling, replaying not just the evening's events, but the entire trajectory of our marriage. I thought about the confident, ambitious photographer I'd been when we met. I remembered how passionate I'd been about my work, how connected I'd felt to the creative community, how clear my vision had been for my future. Somewhere along the way, I'd started believing the subtle messages the Martinez family had been sending, that I was lucky to be included, that my acceptance was conditional on my compliance, that my worth was determined by their assessment of my value to their world. At 3 a.m., I slipped out of bed and padded to my home office. I opened my laptop and began methodical research. Bank accounts, apartment listings in Portland, where my sister Emma had just finished her residency, flight schedules, storage facilities. By dawn, I had a plan. David left early for a breakfast meeting with potential investors, kissing me absently on his way out. The moment his car pulled away from our building, I began executing my exit strategy with surprising clarity and determination. First, I called Jake, my former assistant from my busiest photography years, who'd remained loyal despite my gradual withdrawal from the creative scene. "I need a massive favor," I said when he answered on the second ring. "Name it," he replied without hesitation. "I'm leaving David today. Can you come help me pack the essentials?" 3 hours later, Jake arrived with coffee, moving boxes, and the kind of fierce loyalty I'd forgotten existed. We worked efficiently, identifying what I truly needed versus what could be replaced. My camera equipment, portfolio prints, personal documents, and irreplaceable mementos took priority. "I can store whatever doesn't fit in your car at my studio space," Jake offered, carefully wrapping my favorite photograph, a street scene I'd captured during my first month in New York, full of hope and possibility. While Jake organized the physical items, I handled the financial separation with methodical precision. I transferred exactly half of our joint savings into my personal account, not a penny more, despite the temptation. I paid my portion of the upcoming bills. I made a list of subscriptions and services to transfer or cancel. By mid-afternoon, my Honda Civic was packed with the concentrated essence of my life. Jake hugged me fiercely before getting into his own car. "Call me when you land safely. And Sarah, I'm proud as hell of you." Alone in what had been our home for 4 years, I sat at my kitchen table and wrote David a letter. I kept it straightforward, explaining that I needed time and space to reevaluate our marriage and my place in his family's world. I detailed exactly what I had taken and what I had contributed to outstanding expenses. I asked for no contact while I sorted through my feelings and figured out my next steps. I did not share my destination. As a final gesture, I removed my wedding ring, the Tiffany solitaire that had once represented such promise, and placed it on top of the letter on our kitchen counter. Next to it, I left a handwritten copy of Marcus's exact words, dated and noted clinically, like evidence in a case file. Before leaving, I allowed myself one moment of pure sentiment. I picked up our wedding photo from the hallway table, both of us radiant with hope. David's smile reaching his eyes, my own face glowing with confidence I barely recognized anymore. "Goodbye," I whispered, replacing the frame and walking toward the door without looking back. The sensation of driving away from our Brooklyn neighborhood was simultaneously terrifying and exhilarating. With each mile marker on I-95 North, the tightness in my chest loosened incrementally. By the time I crossed into Connecticut, I felt like I could breathe fully for the first time in years. I checked into a modest hotel near Hartford that evening. Using the credit card I'd maintained separately throughout our marriage, a small act of independence I hadn't even realized was preparation for this moment. After confirming my safe arrival to both Jake and Emma, I turned off my phone. David would be home by now, finding an empty closet and my letter. The thought brought neither satisfaction nor guilt, only a strange, peaceful numbness. In the anonymous quiet of the hotel room, I curled under unfamiliar blankets and fell into the deepest sleep I'd had in months. The challenge had been accepted. Now came the hard part, disappearing not just physically, but untangling myself from the identity I'd constructed as David Martinez's wife, and discovering if Marcus had been right about whether anyone would actually notice I was gone. Portland welcomed me with 3 days of steady rain, as if the Pacific Northwest was washing away my old life. Emma had found me a month-to-month furnished apartment in her neighborhood, a cozy one. Bedroom in a converted Victorian with exposed brick walls and enormous windows perfect for a photographer's eye. After the spacious Brooklyn apartment David and I had shared, the compact space should have felt cramped. Instead, it felt like sanctuary. The building's nothing fancy. Emma apologized as she helped me carry in my limited belongings. But the light is incredible, and the landlord is cool about tenants using the basement as studio space. It's perfect, I assured her, running my hands along the weathered windowsill. It's completely mine. That first week blurred past in a series of practical arrangements. New bank account at a local credit union. Mail forwarding through Jake rather than leaving a direct trail. Portland phone number. Updated profiles on photography platforms. Carefully curating my portfolio to remove any work connected to David's network. David's messages evolved predictably through the stages of grief. Confusion turned to irritation, then concern, then anger, then bargaining. Where are you? Call me. This is ridiculous. Come home so we can talk. Your sister won't tell me anything. At least let me know you're safe. I have the Miami presentation next week. I need you here. Fine. Take your space. We'll figure this out when I get back. Not once did he mention Marcus's comment. Not once did he acknowledge any understanding of why I might have left. I maintained radio silence, not from cruelty but self-preservation. Every time I considered responding, I remembered the laughter around that mahogany table, the years of subtle diminishment, the gradual erosion of my identity. Meanwhile, Marcus posted a passive-aggressive Instagram story 2 weeks after my departure. Family is everything. Real family sticks together through thick and thin. The comments filled with heart emojis from various Martinez connections. I responded to none of them. Instead, I focused on rebuilding. Jake shipped the remainder of my photography equipment in unmarked boxes. I found a therapist specializing in family trauma and codependency, Dr. Chen, whose weekly sessions often left me emotionally drained but incrementally stronger. Marcus's comment at Thanksgiving. Dr. Chen observed during our third session, "That wasn't the cause of your departure. It was the catalyst, the final straw." I agreed. "Tell me about the first straw," she prompted. That question unlocked a flood of memories, years of subtle digs, disguised as helpful advice, achievements minimized, opinions dismissed, all while David stood by, not malicious but complicit in his silence. By month 2, I had secured steady freelance work through online platforms. The projects weren't particularly creative, mostly product photography for small businesses, and headshots for LinkedIn profiles. But they paid the bills and slowly rebuilt my professional confidence. One rainy Tuesday, I was walking through the Pearl District when I noticed a striking mural covering an entire building wall. A barista at the nearby coffee shop saw me studying it. "Beautiful, right? The owner commissioned it from a local artist," she explained while preparing my cortado. "Actually, she's been looking for a photographer to document the neighborhood's art scene. Someone with a real eye, not just Instagram pretty." An hour later, I was sitting with Maya Rodriguez, a 40-something gallery owner with silver, streaked hair and the kind of direct energy I found immediately refreshing. "I don't care about your resume," she said, waving away the tablet where I'd pulled up my portfolio. "Show me your personal work. The stuff you shoot because you can't not shoot it." I hesitated, then navigated to a folder I'd barely opened in years. These were photographs I'd taken for myself, experimental street photography, intimate portraits of strangers, abstract architectural details that caught my eye during lonely walks through the city. Maya studied them in focused silence, occasionally zooming in on specific elements. "You've been hiding," she finally said, looking up with sharp brown eyes. "This work is exceptional. Really exceptional. But recent? No. I haven't done personal work like this in years," I admitted. "Why not?" The question was simple but struck like a physical blow. I found myself telling Maya an abbreviated version of my story, the creative passion I'd once had, the gradual sublimation of my artistic voice to suit David's world, the slow surrender of my vision to family expectations. Maya listened without interruption, then nodded once. "I'll hire you for the neighborhood documentation project, but on one condition." "What's that?" "You create one piece of purely personal work every week. Something that's entirely yours. Bring it when we meet for progress updates. I don't care if it's perfect or even finished. I care that you're finding your voice again." Maya became more than a client, she became a mentor, pushing me to reclaim my artistic courage with blunt feedback and unexpected encouragement. Through her, I connected with Portland's vibrant creative community. My calendar slowly filled with projects that engaged rather than depleted me. The neighborhood documentation project turned into something special. I spent weeks walking the same streets at different times of day, capturing how light transformed ordinary corners into something magical. My photographs began telling stories about community, resilience, and the beauty hidden in everyday moments. Meanwhile, David's attempts at contact became less frequent. The divorce papers I filed through a Portland attorney were met with a flurry of calls I didn't answer. Eventually, his lawyer contacted mine, and the proceedings moved forward with clinical efficiency. 4 months into my new life, I allowed myself to check social media. David's profile showed him at various business events, often accompanied by a blonde woman I didn't recognize, probably someone from his Miami project team. Eduardo had posted about the successful launch of their latest development, tagging David with proud father emojis. Marcus shared multiple photos from a family dinner, captioned, "Nothing beats quality time with the people who matter most." The confirmation stung less than I'd expected. Marcus had been right, in a way. My disappearance had barely caused a ripple in the Martinez family pond. But somehow, this validation brought liberation rather than pain. I was no longer defined by their perceptions or limited by their acceptance. 6 months after leaving New York, I received the finalized divorce papers. David had signed without contesting the straightforward division of assets we'd negotiated through our lawyers. No alimony either way, clean split of joint property, complete separation going forward. His only personal communication was a brief note, "I still don't understand why you left, but I won't fight you anymore." That evening, I stood in my bathroom mirror and cut my hair, trading the long style David had always preferred for a modern pixie cut that made my eyes look huge and gave my face new angles. The woman staring back seemed both familiar and completely new, leaner perhaps, with laugh lines around her eyes, but with a clarity of gaze I hadn't seen in years. By month 8, my photography business had expanded enough to require a proper studio space. I rented a converted warehouse loft shared with other artists and entrepreneurs. For the first time since college, I had colleagues who valued my input and challenged my ideas as equals. Maya's neighborhood project caught the attention of Portland Monthly, who featured my work in a 6-page spread about the city's evolving arts district. That exposure led to a gallery invitation, then a commercial client shooting for Nike's Portland headquarters, then word of mouth referrals that kept my calendar booked solid. When the anniversary of my departure approached, the Martinez family had receded from my daily thoughts entirely. They'd become characters in a story I'd lived through rather than active presences in my life. My new world continued expanding organically. A series I shot documenting Portland's homeless population won recognition from the Oregon Arts Commission. My architectural photography landed in Dwell magazine. A comment I made during a photography workshop led to an invitation to speak at a West Coast creative conference. 1 year after Marcus's cruel joke, I was no longer invisible. I had built a life where my presence was not only noticed but valued, where my voice was heard rather than interrupted, where my contributions were recognized rather than dismissed. The challenge had been met, but as I was about to discover, the story was far from over. The email from Sterling Creative arrived exactly 1 year and 2 weeks after that devastating Thanksgiving dinner. The subject line was professional and innocuous. Photographer needed for national campaign. But the content sent electricity through my system. Your architectural work in Dwell magazine caught our attention. We're developing a campaign for Meridian Property Group, and believe your aesthetic would be perfect for the project. Initial meeting available next week if interested. Meridian Property Group was a subsidiary of Martinez Development Corporation, David's family company. The coincidence seemed too precise to be accidental. I called Maya, who had become my sounding board for all major decisions over the past year. It could be completely legitimate, she reasoned after I explained the connection. Your Dwell feature has been everywhere. I've had 3 people mention it just this week. But the timing feels suspicious, I finished. The question isn't whether they know who you are, Maya said pragmatically. The question is whether the project is worth taking regardless of the family drama. I requested more information from Sterling Creative. The campaign was substantial, photographing luxury developments across the Pacific Northwest for a major advertising push, with potential for ongoing brand photography work. The budget they proposed was triple anything I'd handled since establishing my Portland practice. After 3 days of deliberation, I accepted the initial meeting. If this was Martinez orchestration, I wanted to face it directly rather than spend months wondering. And if it was legitimate, I refused to let fear of my past constrain my professional future. The sterling creative director, Alex Martinez, no relation, just one of those cosmic jokes, made no indication during our first meeting that he knew about my history with the Martinez family. We discussed creative concepts, timeline, budget, and deliverables with straightforward professionalism. When I asked about client involvement, he mentioned only that Meridian executives would review major milestones and approve final selections. I accepted the project, establishing clear boundaries about communication channels and approval processes. For 4 weeks, everything proceeded normally. My preliminary shots of their Seattle development received enthusiastic feedback. The timeline remained on track. No Martinez names appeared on any correspondence. Then came the announcement that changed everything. Meridian Property Group would be the featured presenter at the annual Pacific Northwest Real Estate Innovation Summit, unveiling their new brand identity and expansion strategy. As the lead photographer for their campaign, my attendance was highly encouraged for the presentation and networking reception. The summit was exactly the kind of industry event that could accelerate my career to the next level. It was also precisely the sort of function the Martinez family never missed. Eduardo considered these networking events essential to maintaining their East Coast business relationships and West Coast expansion plans. You have 3 options, Dr. Chen observed during our session that week. Skip it and potentially limit your professional growth. Attend and try to avoid the Martinez family, which could prove stressful and ultimately impossible. Or attend and prepare to engage with them on your own terms. What would you do? I asked. Dr. Chen smiled slightly. I'm more interested in what Sarah today would do, versus Sarah from a year ago. The question stayed with me as I left her office. Last year's Sarah would have either declined entirely, or attended as David's anxious shadow, dreading Marcus's barbed comments and Carmen's conditional approval. But I wasn't that person anymore. The next morning, I emailed Alex confirming my attendance. Then I made an appointment with a personal stylist recommended by Maya, and set aside a portion of my sterling advance for an outfit that would serve as both armor and announcement. The evening of the summit arrived with unexpected calm. I surveyed my reflection in the hotel room mirror. The woman looking back wore a tailored burgundy blazer over dark jeans, professional but distinctly artistic, appropriate for the venue, but entirely my own aesthetic. My pixie cut was styled with subtle product that caught the light, and my makeup emphasized the confidence in my eyes, rather than hiding behind conventional beauty standards. Most transformative was my posture. No apologetic slouch, no nervous energy, just steady readiness for whatever the night might bring. The venue was a converted warehouse in Portland's industrial district, its soaring ceilings and exposed brick creating perfect acoustics for networking conversations. I checked in at registration, accepting my name badge, and the signature cocktail offered by circulating staff. I had barely taken 2 sips when Alex appeared with a cluster of industry executives, immediately introducing me as the talent behind Meridian's stunning campaign photography. Business cards disappeared into my clutch as we discussed market trends and visual storytelling strategies. I found myself speaking with natural authority, my opinions met with thoughtful engagement rather than polite dismissal. 5 minutes into the event, I was deep in conversation with an editor from Architectural Record when I felt a familiar shift in the room's energy. I didn't need to turn around to know the Martinez family had arrived. Eduardo's booming laugh, carrying across the warehouse space, confirmed it moments later. I finished my point about the psychology of architectural photography before excusing myself to visit the bar. As I waited for a sparkling water, I carefully scanned the crowd. Eduardo and Carmen stood near the entrance, holding court among a circle of admirers. Sophia wasn't visible, probably back in Greenwich with her children. Marcus stood slightly apart from his parents, looking somehow smaller than I remembered, despite his perfectly tailored suit. Then I saw David, He was thinner than when I'd left, more angular, with new lines around his eyes that made him look older than his 34 years. Our gazes met across the crowded space. His eyes widened in unmistakable shock, his lips parting slightly as if to speak despite the distance between us. I held his stare steadily, neither smiling nor frowning, then deliberately turned my attention back to the bartender, thanking him for my drink with genuine warmth. The initial encounter came minutes later. Eduardo approached while I was reviewing the event program, his expression carefully neutral. "Sarah," he said, his tone conveying neither warmth nor hostility. "Quite a surprise, Eduardo." I nodded, meeting his gaze directly. "I'm the lead photographer for Meridian's Pacific Northwest campaign." He blinked, momentarily disconcerted by my calm professionalism. I wasn't aware the creative was being handled externally through Sterling. "Yes, I've been working with Alex's team for the past month. The initial market response has been very positive." I spoke as I would to any client's executive professional, assured, treating him as a business acquaintance, rather than the man who had once explained basic photography concepts to me over family dinners. "I see." He seemed to reassess me, noting the changes a year had brought. "Your work has evolved since you left New York." "Not evolved," I corrected with a small smile. "Returned to its authentic direction." Eduardo shifted uncomfortably, clearly unsure how to navigate this new dynamic. "Carmen is here somewhere. I'm sure she'd want to say hello." "Of course," I replied, neither encouraging nor discouraging the prospect. As Eduardo moved away, presumably to alert the family to my presence, I rejoined a conversation with the Sterling team about upcoming presentation logistics. From my peripheral vision, I could see the ripple effect as Eduardo spoke quietly to Carmen, whose carefully maintained composure flickered as she searched the crowd for me. The Meridian presentation was scheduled for the heart of the evening's program. As the time approached, Alex guided me toward the staging area, both of us focused on final technical details. We were nearly there when Marcus stepped directly into our path, his expression a complex mixture of surprise and something else, calculation, maybe, or uncertainty. "Sarah," he said, his voice lacking its usual confident edge, "no one mentioned you were involved with this project." "Marcus," I acknowledged neutrally, "I'm working with Sterling Creative." "Alex, this is Marcus Martinez from the client family." Alex extended his hand with professional courtesy. "Mr. Martinez, pleasure to meet you. Sarah's work has been exceptional, exactly what Meridian needed for this campaign." "You know her work?" Marcus asked, his tone suggesting this was somehow problematic. "We're family," Marcus continued, that familiar smirk starting to form. "Or were, anyway." "How nice," Alex replied diplomatically. "Excuse us, we need to prepare for the presentation." As we walked away, Alex glanced at me questioningly, but respected my privacy enough not to pry. I appreciated his professionalism more than he could know. The presentation itself passed in a focused blur of professional competence. I spoke about visual storytelling and architectural psychology, demonstrated key elements of the campaign strategy, and answered questions with composed expertise. The audience response was overwhelmingly positive, with spontaneous applause at several key moments. From my position on stage, I could see the entire Martinez family seated in the VIP section near the front. Carmen maintained her practiced neutral expression throughout. Eduardo nodded occasionally at particularly impressive metrics. Marcus whispered something to the woman beside him, probably a business associate, his face unreadable in the stage lights. David watched me with undisguised intensity, his eyes never leaving my face as I spoke about finding authentic voice in commercial work, about the importance of artistic integrity, even within client constraints. After the formal presentation concluded, I was immediately surrounded by attendees with questions and compliments. Business cards were exchanged, potential collaborations discussed, connections established. This professional validation, earned entirely on my own merit, felt like the sweetest possible vindication. Eventually, the crowd thinned as people moved toward the networking reception. I was organizing my presentation materials when David finally approached alone. "You look," he started, then stopped, hands tucked awkwardly in his pockets. "You look really well." "Thank you," I replied simply. "I didn't know you were in Portland." "That was intentional." He nodded, accepting this truth. "Your presentation was impressive. You always were talented." "I always am talented," I corrected gently. Present tense. David looked down, then back up with unexpected directness. I've thought a lot about what happened. About Marcus's comment and everything that led up to it. I didn't understand at first, but this year has been... He paused, searching for words. Clarifying. I'm glad to hear that. I miss you, he admitted quietly. The words hung between us once so desperately desired, now arriving too late to change anything fundamental. I felt no triumph in his regret, no vindictive pleasure in his obvious loneliness. Just calm certainty that I'd made the right choice. I need to join the reception, I said. Neither cruel nor encouraging. My team is waiting. Could we maybe get coffee tomorrow? Just to talk. I considered his request, weighing my own emotional landscape carefully. I can spare 30 minutes before my flight. Professional courtesy. Relief flickered across his face. Thank you. As I gathered my materials, Carmen appeared at David's elbow, her social smile firmly in place despite the tension I could see around her eyes. Sarah, darling, what an absolute delight to see you thriving so beautifully. Her words were perfect. Her tone betrayed her discomfort with this entire situation. Carmen, I acknowledged. I hope you're well. We've missed you at family gatherings, she continued with practiced ease. Your sweet potato casserole was always such a hit. The old Sarah would have accepted this revisionist history, grateful for any crumb of acknowledgement. The new Sarah held her ground. That's interesting, I replied pleasantly. I recall my contributions usually being placed in the kitchen, while Sophia's dishes took center stage at the actual table. Carmen's smile faltered briefly before recovering. A simple misunderstanding, I'm sure. Multiple simple misunderstandings over 6 years. I agreed, maintaining my pleasant tone. How fortunate that I now work in environments where such misunderstandings rarely occur. Before Carmen could respond, the event coordinator announced the transition to the networking reception. I excused myself with polite finality, joining the sterling team across the room. The remainder of the evening passed without further direct interaction, though I occasionally caught various Martinez family members watching me from across the venue. As the event concluded, I declined my team's invitation for after-party drinks, preferring the quiet satisfaction of returning to my hotel room alone. The next morning's coffee meeting with David took place in the hotel lobby cafe. We sat at a small table by the windows, Portland's skyline creating a neutral backdrop for our conversation. Seattle suits you, he offered, stirring his Americano. Portland, I corrected. And yes, it does. Portland. He smiled ruefully. I should have known you'd choose somewhere with better coffee. We talked for exactly 30 minutes longer than I'd initially planned, but less than he'd clearly hoped for. David shared how the family dynamics had shifted in my absence. Marcus's criticism had expanded to include David's new girlfriend. Carmen's control over family events had intensified. Eduardo's disappointment when David had declined a promotion requiring relocation to Miami full-time. I'm seeing everything differently now, he explained. Like someone adjusted the contrast on a photo I'd been staring at my whole life. When our cups emptied, we both recognized the natural conclusion. As we stood to leave, David asked the question I'd been expecting. Is there any chance for us? Not immediately, but eventually. I studied his face, once the center of my world, still handsome, still capable of making my heart skip slightly. I felt affection, compassion, even a whisper of old attraction. But the fundamental connection had been severed, not just by Marcus's cruelty or my departure, but by the year of growth that had followed. I think we both needed to become different people, I said gently. And I really like who I'm becoming. He nodded, accepting this finality with surprising grace. You were always stronger than I gave you credit for. We both were, I corrected. You just needed different circumstances to discover it. We parted with a brief, platonic hug that felt like proper closure. As I watched him walk away, I realized I genuinely hoped he would build a life authentic to himself, rather than just an extension of the Martinez legacy. 6 months later, I was preparing for my first solo exhibition. Invisible Landscapes, Finding Beauty in Overlooked Spaces. When Maya handed me an envelope that had arrived with the gallery mail. Inside was a simple card featuring one of my photographs from the Portland Neighborhood series. The handwritten note reads, Sarah, saw your work featured in Art Forum. Magnificent stuff. Thought you'd want to know that David finally stood up to Dad about the Miami position. He's staying in New York and dating a teacher who doesn't give a damn about our family money. Mom is scandalized. It's pretty great, actually. Also, we're expecting our second kid, and I've been thinking a lot about family patterns worth breaking. Thanks for showing us it was possible to just leave. Sophia P.S. Marcus asks about you sometimes. I think you terrified him by actually taking his dare. I smiled, tucking the card into my portfolio. The Martinez family had become just people I'd once known intimately, who now occupied appropriate space in my past rather than outsized significance in my present. That evening, as Portland's lights twinkled against the darkening river, I opened my journal and wrote the reflection that had been forming for months. Sometimes you have to disappear from other people's narratives to discover your own. The most powerful response to being unseen isn't demanding vision from blind eyes, it's finding the context where your authentic self isn't just visible, but celebrated. The opposite of disappearing isn't being noticed. It's becoming so fully present in your own life that external validation becomes irrelevant. Marcus's challenge, if you just vanished tomorrow, nobody would even miss you, had been not just accepted, but transformed into an unexpected gift. I had disappeared from their world only to reappear, transformed, in my own. The woman who had sat silently through that devastating Thanksgiving dinner could never have imagined the journey ahead. The woman writing these words could never return to who she had been, and in that transformation lay not tragedy, but triumph. The quiet, sustainable victory of reclaiming your own life. Have you ever had someone's cruel words push you toward a life-changing decision? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments. If this resonated with you, please like and share with someone who might need to hear that sometimes walking away is the strongest move you can make. Thank you for following Sarah's journey, and remember your worth is never determined by those who fail to see it.